Good morning. It's wonderful to see everyone at the 4th Annual Harkin Retirement Security Symposium here in Des Moines on the campus of Drake University. Thank you all for joining us, for following the work, and of course, welcome to our online audience as well. We have a very loyal and really supportive audience and speakers that we have worked with over the last 4 years. So it's wonderful to see some people coming back. As Senator Harkin said, Teresa was one of our speakers for the very first symposium in Washington, D.C. It's wonderful to see this event grow with the years. I also want to thank Senator Harkin for the very generous introduction, and it is truly a privilege to work at the Harkin Institute and to continue to work on the policies that he worked so hard for decades to improve the well-being of all Americans and on so many policy issues. So please follow our work. We do wonderful things in wellness and nutrition, disability policy, and also labor. So just truly a privilege to work at the Harkin Institute and lead this work. I wanted to say just a couple of sort of housekeeping notes, but to follow up on the wonderful book that Teresa published recently, Work, Retire, Repeat. She has graciously agreed to sign copies. So during lunch break, we have copies of her book if you would like to get a copy of the book, and Teresa will sign your copy as well. I really enjoyed reading this book. I think first of all, as an economist as well, I know how difficult it is to write, to be accessible to the average person. So I think Teresa has done an amazing job with such a difficult task. So that's my informal review of your book, Teresa, right now. But I think she has wonderful statements about how valuable retirement is to us as a society, right? And to the point that Senator Harkin made, it is not just a number that we are looking at. It is a very complex decision. And that's really what we are talking about today as well, with this convening that looks at different aspects of economic security and retirement security. The other brief announcement that I wanted to make was that we have 5 agencies and organizations who are in our community here. We have the Social Security Administration, we have the Iowa ABO office with the state treasurer. We also have the Financial Empowerment Center at the Evelyn K. Davis Center. We have the Iowa SHIP program, which provides Medicare counseling, and then we have foster groups. So please visit with them during the breaks and see what materials they have to share about the work that they do. We also have a very quick transition to the next panel. I will make a brief introduction of the panel, and I will ask the speakers to join me at the podium. So our next panel, I will share this story very briefly, comes through this collaboration that emerged that I really love about my job. So David Harris and Mike Ambery were looking to visit Des Moines and Drake University, and then the Harkin Institute and the business school collaborated on bringing them in the fall for a panel. And the focus of the panel was to discuss both the sort of global landscape and then the US landscape on retirement accumulation and then retirement income. So the second panel, unfortunately, Mother Nature intervened and we could not video stream that, and we were able to build this back into this program. So I am so delighted to really have everybody on this panel in person with us in Des Moines. And this panel on global U.S. retirement on global retirement income and U.S. landscape is moderated by Matt Stagner, who is with Foster Group, but most importantly, he's also on the National Advisory Council of the Harkin Institute. So thank you, Matt, for leading the discussion. And please join us on the stage.
Lucky it wasn't a race.
Well, thank you all for being here. This is a really important event about a really important topic that's often referred to as one of the biggest challenges in all of finances or financial planning. And the reason it's considered that, I think, is because it's at the intersection of national policy, state policy, global policy, investments, behavior of individuals, of advice. There's so many different interested parties and so many different factors that come into whether or not there's a secure retirement experience for an individual. It's something that I see every day as a financial planner. My clients are always saying, well, I've saved my entire life, but now what? Right? And how do I replicate that paycheck that I used to get, or that experience, or that feeling, or the lifestyle I had when there was a paycheck coming in from work? And in a time where they have so many different options, it can be overwhelming. It can be a difficult decision for people to make. It's something that, in many ways, advisors take on ourselves, right? So we'll say, okay, here's what you've accumulated, here's my plan for you, as opposed to having so many things that are set in stone. But the easiest plans are those that have a really strong aspect of income that is already in place. That floor, that baseline of income that we can build on as advisors, as individuals, is critical. And it seems pretty clear that that's an obvious solution, but also that it's a very underutilized solution, and there's a big gap there in the existence of what's out there nationally, internationally, and for individuals that we may use and not use. So the esteemed panelists alongside me today bring a range of perspectives from across the globe, from years and years of experience. I decided not to do individual introductions of the team because I figured that I would take the entire time just introducing these folks and their credentials. So each panelist will have a few minutes to introduce themselves and kind of make their opening statement, and then we'll have a little bit more of a roundtable discussion from there. Please, if you have questions, there is a way to submit those online, I believe, or text those questions in. I'm sure our hosts can help with that. So we can just get started with Jeffrey Brown from the University of Illinois.
Great, thank you. And I'm really delighted to be here, so thank you all for being here. I was one of the folks that was going to participate remotely back in the fall when you had the power outage, so I'm glad to actually be here in person today. We spend an enormous amount of time and energy in this country focusing on accumulating wealth. And it's questions like, how much should I put in my 401k, and what is my number, and do I have enough? But I think the more important question is, how do we actually make sure that we have enough money to live on in retirement no matter how long we live? And that really is a reframing of the question from one around accumulating wealth to one that is about providing secure retirement income. Because the real truth of the matter is that a pile of money is not a retirement plan. It is an important ingredient, and it's part of the raw material, but by itself, it's not enough. And so that distinction between wealth and income is something that I've spent 3 decades now studying, and I'm really excited that we have the opportunity to have a conversation about it today. So most of you in this room know that over the last 4 to 5 decades, we've undergone a pretty dramatic transformation of what retirement in the United States looked like. If you go back to the 1950s, 60s, 70s, workers that were fortunate enough to have one retired not only with Social Security, but also a defined benefit pension plan. Today, the typical worker that has one, many do not, but they have Social Security, which is facing its own financial shortfalls. And they have a 401k plan, which is entirely focused, for the most part, on wealth accumulation. And so what we've basically taken is what William Sharpe, who's a Nobel laureate in economics, calls the hardest problem in finance, which is to think about how to decumulate or how to draw down your wealth sustainably. And we've taken it away from the actuaries and the investment professionals and the investment committees, and we've handed it to people. And, the libertarian in me thinks, well, maybe that's a good thing, but the behavioral economist in me looks at that and says, people do not know how to handle this situation. And spending down sustainably is really, really difficult. And the reason, we've made the problem more difficult because of the fact that there have been policy failures, there have been plan design failures, and because we as individuals, being fully human, bring to bear a number of our own psychological and behavioral biases that actually make this a really difficult problem to solve. So we know, and we just heard, that there are products out there, annuities, that provide guaranteed lifetime income. And yet, the reason I got started in this space 30 years ago in graduate school is because there's this thing that economists call the annuity puzzle, which is we look at these products and we say these are the perfect solution to the problem of longevity risk, of not knowing how long you are going to live. And yet, very few people voluntarily purchase them. Not only in the retail market, but very few people purchase them through their 401k or their retirement plan because most of them don't even have the option to do so. And that's where, in part, the policy and plan design failures have come from. This is part of a bigger issue in my mind, which is that we really need to reframe the entire discussion about retirement in the U.S. away from being so laser focused on the accumulation of wealth and getting people to think about income. It's been almost 20 years now since I published a paper that was one of the shortest papers I ever wrote, and is also now the most highly cited paper I ever wrote, that just did some simple research about how people, you can present them the exact same information about product choices, but just using slight differences in language to get them to think about sustainability of income and consumption, dramatically changes the product mix that they think is appropriate relative to providing that same information where you're getting them to think in investment framework. The stakes of this conversation are quite high. The risk of outliving one's money is an important risk that most retirees face. But there's also another piece of it that people don't always fully appreciate and understand, which is even the people that have enough money, they are afraid to spend, many of them, because they're worried about the uncertainties. They don't know exactly how long they're going to live. And so I'm writing a book on this, and I opened the book with a story of my own mother when I was in graduate school, and I was talking to her on the phone one day, and she said, "Are we going to run out of money?" And I ran all the simulations for her and did the thing that economists do, and she felt a little bit better. And then 3 months later, we were having a conversation, and she said, "Are we going to run out of money?" And what I realized is she wasn't asking for probabilities, she wanted certainty, and we had not developed a system that supported that. So that's why I've been spending a lot of time on this topic. I hope today we can get into a lot of things around the behavioral barriers to it, issues like loss aversion and the way we frame it and how that affects people thinking. But we've also got a number of panelists that are going to talk about the international landscape. And I think it's really important because my observation is that other countries are actually doing this better than we are, or they're at least having the conversation at a more advanced stage than we are in the US. Now, not everything here is gloomy. We have had legislation in the last several years, the Secure 1.0 and Secure 2.0, that have started to remove some of the barriers from putting annuity products and lifetime income products into 401k and other retirement plans. And these are significant steps, and I still remain somewhat hopeful that we do have a long history in this country, including folks like Senator Harkin, that pursued bipartisan legislation in the retirement space. It seems to be one of the last remaining places where you can still get the two parties to talk to one another and work together on finding solutions. On the other hand, it doesn't appear to be high on the agenda of the current administration and the current Congress to really undertake the kind of structural reforms that I think are necessary. And as we all know, this is happening against the backdrop, as the senator said this morning, that we're only now about 6 years away from the Social Security Trust Fund insolvency. And while he's absolutely correct that that doesn't mean the system's going away, it does represent a serious risk to benefits if we don't figure out how to fix that program. And I hope that we use that as an opportunity to have a broader conversation about the entire U.S. retirement system and not just about Social Security, because we need to have that conversation, but it's also why I'm really happy to be on the panel today. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the next panelists, and I look forward to having some really fruitful conversations once we open it up to the back and forth. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Much appreciated. I think we're going to jump to Eric next, if you don't mind. Eric Schimpf from Principal, thank you for joining us.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. I will say, as a Drake grad, I'm really happy to have an excuse to come back to campus. It's great to be back here. I'm from the Washington, D.C. Office of Principal Financial Group. For those of you unfamiliar with the company, we manage over $700 billion worldwide in about 70 markets around the world. We've got offices in 25 of those countries. I handle the international side of the government relations business for the company. So while my colleagues in Washington spend their time advocating before legislative leaders like Senator Harkin, I get to focus almost all of my attention exclusively outside our shores. And much of what I do involves trying to work with our fund managers or with our institutional or family office clients around the world to help understand how geopolitical risk influences their markets and different types of considerations they might need to make as investors if they want to deliver the appropriate outcomes for their clients. And as Jeff said, people are already worried about uncertainties as they face retirement. And I have bad news for you. If you're already worried about uncertainties, then the geopolitical system has something you're not going to like. I want you to think about the geopolitical system essentially as the operating system for the global economy. Now, right now, geopolitics are being rewired. This has been going on really for the last 20 years. For the last 20 years, we've seen changes in collective security, changes to global trade, changes in terms of the role of the US dollar in the global system, whether in terms of payments or as a storehouse of global trust as a reserve currency. Many of those things were already undergoing change. With our own change in election, we've had a different approach to how America engages with the world. And in response to that, Newton's third law happens to apply to geopolitics as it does to physics. For each and every reaction, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And we're definitely in the reaction phase for the rest of the world. And this is producing durable change in collective security, in alliance relationships, in engagement with the US on trade, or engagement with the rest of the world on trade. And unfortunately, the Iran war, right, which of course is in our headlines 24/7 now, the Iran war is both an accelerant and an exacerbator to many of these trends and changes. Where do we see it? Why does this matter for pensions? Well, if you're already in the payout phase, you're going to be faced with inflation. That's already happening in Asia. It's beginning to happen in Europe, right? This energy shock that is coming out of the Persian Gulf, in a way, you're probably fortunate in the US because these shocks happen sequentially, not simultaneously. It does mean, sort of like with COVID, we have time to see what's happening in Asia and understand that much of that's going to be coming to this market here. But for retirees who are already short of retirement income, inflation is a real pressure. Food insecurity becomes a possible pressure. For other countries, we'll already see the reactions politically to resource scarcity that come from shortages in oil and gas and all of the petrochemical elements that come out of the oil and gas supply chain, whether it's helium that's used in your MRI machines or to make semiconductors or to fuel data centers, whether it's naphtha, whether it's other base chemicals that go into agricultural fertilizers. All of those shortages begin cascading through the system, and it prompts countries to act differently, much more likely nationalistically, but also to de-risk from the United States in many ways. Again, whether that's in alliance structure or we certainly see the pressure on reserve currencies with respect to the dollar coming out of this crisis already, as dozens of central banks around the world have already sold down their US dollar reserves. Why? They needed liquidity. They needed cash to pay for subsidies to help their people get through this dislocation caused by the war. As we don't have assurances as to how long the war will last or how long the shortages will last, some of this pressure from the war will be durable through markets. All of this makes life harder on pension fund managers around the world as they try to deal with delivering the guarantees in their annuity contracts for retirement income, as they attempt to figure out better solutions in life cycle investments. So if they have someone who's 40 years old today, they know that they can deliver them the retirement income they deserve to retire with dignity when they get to 65 or 67 or 70. All of these things that you're seeing in terms of geopolitics, I encourage you to think through how they might impact markets, and then think through how they might impact investment managers that you know, certainly whether it's at the industrial level with institutions or at the personal level with people you take care of in your own life. These are realistic conversations to have. Now, fortunately, we've got a panel full of actual pension experts, not me, who are able to discuss that at a much more detailed level. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric, for the uplifting conversation about geopolitical tensions. Next up, we're going to go with Mike Ambry from Standard Life.
I don't make you day drink.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, and good morning, everyone. How are you? It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for the invitation to come back again. I see that there's some tornadoes planned for later, so like the last time, it could be cut short and we could have a power failure, but hopefully not right now. Where shall I start? We've got a birthday, 250 years this year, I think, in the US.
That's great.
And that's about independence. A very topical issue, as independence is probably the area, if I pick from what Jeff said, the area that we should consider. Are we independent in our own views and how we retire and how we save for that retirement? Is it the issues of political parties, political administrations of the day to secure that for us? Or is it down to ourselves, industry experts, providers like ourselves, Standard Life, the leading provider in the UK? Is it down to our own needs and really our own learnings? So I just wanted to share a few things before my friend David Harris talks more globally. I'll talk about the UK and what we've done to sort of change the market really briefly. There's a few slides which are available at a later point. I won't go through those, but I'll sort of suggest what it says. It says within the UK that we've focused on defined contribution and saving. Since 2012, the largest majority of the UK have had to compulsorily save for retirement. I guess the question is that right? Do they feel, do individuals in the UK feel they're saving the right amount of money for their UK and for their own retirement? The answer to that is 4 in 10 feel that they're saving an appropriate amount of money for their retirement. The people that are really confident, and make of it what you will, are men, young people, and the more richer population. That feels about right. Secondly, so we've got a confidence there, a build-up of pension pots. We also see a reliance, and where in the UK we have had 20 years ago a pension commission review what should retirement actually look like. We have the same layers as in the US. What's the state system? What does it provide? Secondly, what's the private system? And then is it affordable for lifetime income and lifetime solution? So whilst I think we've done a great job in the UK of compulsorily saving, making sure that individuals can save, we still have the same issue as in the US. Less than 50% of individuals having a pot at the point of retirement. And then the next phase, as Jeff really alluded to, so if we're saving well, are we investing well? And then are we retiring well? Do I believe that people, when they come to retirement, believe that they're going to retire in the same way that maybe their parents did? defined benefits, final salary, you're going to get a guarantee for the rest of your life. I feel the largest proportion of people get to retirement and have a behavioural shift of going, forgive my language, a shit the bed moment, which then goes, oh, that's not giving me a protection for the rest of my life. What can we do? What can we ensure that people are making the right decisions, supported, guided, and advised around each of those issues? I'll finish off with saying we enter a new era where I think as much as the war in the Gulf is discussed every day, I think AI is discussed every single day as well. So are we entering an era where we have more information, more support, more guidance, and within the industry, do we have the ability to help shave and save that sort of moment where people have a panic about what retirement is and give a level of protection, a level which Senator Harkin returned to before and has championed, to give dignity for people to be able to save and have security in their retirement. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Just to make sure we have geographical and accent diversification up here, we're going to move to David Harris. Take over.
Thank you, sir. Men and women of this great state of Iowa, it's great to be back here. It's 28 years since I first came and set my feet in Des Moines, Iowa, courtesy of Larry Zempelman, and say thank you, Larry, for the invite and the friendship. Thank you, Craig and Raina, for doing a great job, and also Senator Harkin. I testified in front of your great committees last century, and I was on the wrong side of the Social Security reform privatisation debate, but I enjoyed it very much. And as a fellow pilot, I respect you greatly for jumping out of an aircraft as well last century. My background as a dairy farmer's child, and also as a regulator, a political advisor, and now as a consultant. And Eric knows the story that allows you to drink in bars all over the world by yourself, but more importantly, to worry about the issues that are concerning most today. There is a real fundamental concern across the world. That is, people are worried not about dying too soon, but they're worried about living too long. And not only are they worried about living too long, ladies and gentlemen, they're worried about living too long in a state of retirement that is impacted by dementia and Parkinson's disease and cognitive decline. The biggest killers in my fair country that I've adopted, the United Kingdom, after the United States, 212-513344, my social security number for everybody out there, is the biggest killer in the UK is dementia. Biggest killer in Australia is dementia. And we've all gone through that, and it's touched it. My mum died of vascular dementia, and it has an impact. But I'm going to sweep you across the world and tell you what the world is trying to do on retirement income. In New Zealand's turned its back on annuities. The number of annuities that were sold in New Zealand in 2014 was 1. Today, they don't have annuitisation. And you might say, for what does the population of 5 million rely on? They rely on auto-enrolment, and of contributions only 7%. But for women who are trying to immunise themselves on longevity risk, their husbands have died in their 70s, where do they put their retirement money in? Where do they put their funds in to try to create a synthetic annuity? Ladies and gentlemen, it's rental property, investment property in their 70s. Oh dear. You can get into the debate about that. So you've got younger people competing for our limited resources of housing, and you've got elderly people also trying to use it as a synthetic annuity. The biggest debate we have to confront as a society, and congratulations on the 250th anniversary, is housing. It's a basic need. And for younger people who are trying to debate in New Zealand, do I withdraw my money for retirement or do I put it into housing? New Zealanders withdraw money from their retirement pots for housing deposits. What a terrible challenge. In Australia, I worked as a regulator, and we used the C word, ladies and gentlemen. Mike, steady. We used the C word, which was compulsion. And Senator Harkin, I talked to you about this many, many years ago, and Jim DeMint and Pat Toomey and all those good people, and they said, and Nick Smith from Michigan told me once, Congressman, sir, we don't use that C word in the United States. We don't believe in compulsion. But as a convict settlement that Australia was, we do. And we make Australians put 12%. And thank you, Georgia, for that opportunity as well back in the 1770s. We put 12% of people's salary into retirement. We put 3% in a voluntary basis into individual accounts. That's 15% in total. And who have been the biggest winners? The biggest winners have been women. Women who didn't have coverage of pensions. Back in 1983, when I was a lot thinner and had black hair, people were covered by 40% of voluntary savings in a 401k equivalent. Today, it's 91%. When you earn $1 in Australia, your employer has to put in that 12% contribution. We're going down the route in Australia of a retirement income covenant. In legislation, the word covenant, we all know the good book and what it says about covenants, and the regulator in 6 pages is saying for the fiduciary, get off your lower part of your body, try and be polite, Mike, and focus on developing enhanced retirement solutions for Australians. Quickly into South Africa, the slides are on the website. Raina, thank you. South Africa is having flexible annuities. They don't hang about with regard to cognitive decline. They automatically reallocate assets from equities to bonds over time as people age in retirement. They take the decision out. And I think that's quite important, ladies and gentlemen, taking the decision out. And you don't want to be 80 years old in cognitive decline and exposed 80% in equities. I would argue that's not a good idea. Let's swing up to the UK. Mike's talked about retirement income. I won't go near that. And my dear friend Jeff Brown talked about deferred annuities. Deferred annuities across the world are there, but not many people want them broadly. And that's a challenge. The question is why. The UK is encountering the issue of retirement income. My dear friends who draw ancestry from Ireland, I'll go to Ireland now. And we all get misty-eyed and think about Guinness and Mike Arsenal playing later on in the football. But in Ireland's brought in auto-enrolment this year that I worked on for 11 years, and you guessed it, they're also allowing and talking about in-scheme drawdown. That is allowing people to harness their retirement from their plan. Don't let them leave the plan that's been good, the trustee, the fiduciary, but harness them in retirement. We talk about Chile, and Chile is quite an important case study in itself. But again, it's a 50% informal economy that exists in Chile. So I've now wrapped up on retirement income. Eric, you made some valuable lessons and comments about the geopolitical design. I'd give you 2 stats. Australia has 31 days left of diesel supplies, 32 days of avgas or Jet A1. The challenge is for many, many people is the stress that it's going to be associated with living too long is that they're going to be poorer potentially for a lot longer. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Process of elimination, I assume that makes me next.
I'll let Jenny bring it back to the U.S.
Exactly, and I kind of love being the last panelist to talk a little bit about who I am and what I represent, because for the United States, I think I get to represent the solution to the geopolitical uncertainty and the fact that people have the onus to save on their own and to figure out how to spend on their own. The best thing that we can bring them is annuities. And today I'm the head of new markets product at Athene, which is an insurance company in the great state of Illinois, leading annuity manufacturer in the industry. And in partnership with Apollo and Apollo's affiliate Viterra, we are working to bring both private markets and guaranteed income to the defined contribution space so that the mass affluent can live comfortably in retirement and spend on the thing that we all know is the only way we give people the opportunity to have true lifetime income, which is through annuities. Now today I'm at Athene. I've literally been there for 4 weeks. So I'm the new kid on the block at Athene. I'm the new kid on the block in this panel. But I started my career about 20 years ago as a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed young actuary. I was studying for exams. I was working for Great West. And I was dutifully saving in my retirement plan because my dad told me that's what I was supposed to do. And I had just joined the financial services division at a company that was called Great West then. It's Empower now. And the president of the division came to me and he said, we've got to design lifetime income products for 401ks. And it was like a mind-blowing moment. I was a kid and I thought, wait a minute, I'm saving in my 401k. What are you mean to tell me that I don't actually have a solution for these savings to turn into spending when I retire? Now, let's be fair, I was an actuary. I have a very financially centered mind, so that all made a lot of sense to me. I was engaged with my money, but I was shocked to find out the 401k system didn't have lifetime income in it. So I thought, young actuary, all we have to do is design a great lifetime income product and put it in 401ks and people get it and then they'll have lifetime income for the rest of their life. And we launched a product called Great West Secure Foundation in 2010. It still exists today. It's called Empower Secure Foundation. And it was exciting and there was great fanfare. And then we found out with the rest of the industry that the administrative and regulatory environment just wasn't ready for lifetime income in retirement plans. So I've spent the last 20 years with one foot in annuity design and development in the retail landscape, where Athene and competitors at the time, like Great West, who's Protective now, like Corebridge, where I just came from, have great products. I could go through the alphabet soup of annuities. I could talk to you about how GLWBs work and RILAs work, and that would be fun for some of us. It'd be fun, I know, for Ralph, who I've met in lots of circles in our careers. But the important thing is that in the retail space, when we design annuities and we distribute them through financial planners, we're having a sophisticated sale within a financial planner who gets to have a sophisticated conversation with a person sitting across the table. And we have millions of people and trillions of dollars sitting in our 401k system that doesn't get the benefit of sitting with a financial advisor in planning for retirement. And I wish we had enough to go around. We just don't. So what Athene, Apollo, and Viterra are working on is a way to bring the benefits of those products, those annuities, into workplace retirement plans in a way that is easy to access and takes minimal engagement. I am absolutely an American, excited about our 250th birthday. I don't believe in the word compulsion, but I do believe in helping people make the right choices and giving them choice. Make the right decisions and giving them choice on the back end. What we've learned in the 401k system is that we have to auto-enroll people. We need to auto-escalate them. We need to automatically invest them to make sure they're on a good glide path and target date funds so that they get more conservative over time. And what Apollo, Athene, and Viterra believe is that we also need to have a framework for automatic income. Because otherwise people get to retirement and they look at this big chunk of money and they say, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I had $200,000 or $400,000. And they're terrified of that number ever being lower than it is at the moment of retirement. When the reality is the whole time we were auto-enrolling them and auto-escalating them and auto-investing them, our intention was for them to spend that money in retirement. And what we know is that people do two things. They either spend too fast, but that is not the behavior I'm concerned about, or they sit on it. And they don't spend it all, and they don't engage socially, they don't engage actively because they're afraid to spend their money. Michael Finke and Wade Pfau have a great article, or a great white paper, it's not an article, I should give them more academic credit than that, that says people that have guaranteed income, a source of guaranteed income in their retirement portfolio, not only spend more money in retirement, but they spend more money on things that bring them joy. So I am personally incredibly optimistic that this challenge we have in front of us is actually on the precipice of being solved in a way that our retirees are spending money on the things that bring them joy. And in doing that, they stay more socially engaged, they stave off dementia, they stay out of the long-term care facilities, and we've really done a great thing for society, and we do it by bringing lifetime income in the form of annuities into workplace retirement plans. So excited to be at this great symposium, excited to be in the state of Illinois where my insurance company is domiciled, so thanks for all the support, and to have all these great ideas coming together. Thank you.
Well, we are right on time, which is unusual for a panel like this. So thank you all for your opening comments. We'll shift now to the conversation around retirement income as a policy perspective. Is there a silver bullet? Is there a policy that would just solve the whole issue for the U.S. retirement system? And if so, is that taken from the UK or from Australia or from somewhere else, or is there a solution already there? We just need the right policy in place. And I'll throw that out there and see who wants to start.
I'm happy to kick off. I think the answer is no, there's not a silver bullet. I think there's enough bright people in this room who've been working on the challenge for so many years that we know there's not a perfect single bullet. I think there's ongoing grace that policymakers can give to plan decision makers who are responsible for the trillions of dollars of assets sitting in our defined contribution system. There's ongoing grace that we can give them to try to minimize what they see as litigation risk, right? I think the DC industry was a brilliant idea. As the defined benefit industry started to decline in the United States, we said, oh, well, let's give people the option to save. And there's been, I think the Pension Protection Act in 2006 was a silver bullet on how to get people to save more. Now, we know that not everybody saves enough, and we still need to do more there. But what we keep looking for is, in that framework, we were looking for ways to get people to save, get people to save, get people to save. And then the industry got laser focused on don't charge them too much money, don't charge them too much money, don't charge them too much money, because litigation came out when there was a perception of too much money. And I think you see a lot of policy now, and in fact, the most recent DOL opinion that came out, I think helps say what we need to focus on in retirement plans is not how much money somebody's spending on their investments, but rather what is their outcome. Are we helping people live a secure retirement? Because there's great investments out there that cost a ton of money to invest in, but they'll give you performance net of returns that are better than a low-cost investment. So what we need to continue to do is give plan sponsors that grace to continue to make decisions, continue to pursue the things that will drive outcomes in retirement, and help them not have that fear of litigation.
So I would, first of all, underscore this point. So when 401ks first came on the market, and we all know they weren't really designed initially as a retirement plan, they were a supplemental savings vehicle, and it took a long time for the regulatory environment to catch up with that reality. And one of the problems that existed early on is there was a fiduciary standard that applied to defined benefit plans that sort of got ported over to the 401k world that said that if you were going to provide an annuity, it had to be the safest annuity available. It didn't say it had to be safe. It didn't say you had to do due diligence. It said it had to be the safest annuity available, which is basically an impossibly high standard. And so if you talk to any ERISA lawyer back until this rule got relaxed, their advice is you would be crazy to put an annuity in your 401k plan. And so most firms didn't do it. And that was a big reason for it. But there's another reason for it, which is what I was sort of getting at around the framing issue, that most consumers, we have conditioned them to think about success as how much money is in their account. And that's what leads to this issue of once you have a certain amount of money in your account, they don't want to see it decline. We've conditioned them for 40 years of work to watch that account grow. And so that's why I've been in favor of lifetime income disclosure. We need to get them thinking about income levels instead of wealth and so forth. But at the end of the day, there are a continuum of options for how to get annuities into plans, from let's just encourage them to do, which is going to be limited, to let's require that firms at least offer the annuity. That's a step short of compulsory annuitization for the participant, but at least we should be doing something to remove the barriers to them offering annuities in their plans. We ought to at least be having a conversation about whether we want to go further and require that they at least provide some kind of an option, because right now we're in this funny world where it's like, if I'm a 401k plan sponsor and I say, when you get to retirement age in my plan, you are on your own, I bear no responsibility for that. But if I decide to do the right thing and provide you income options, then suddenly I face a bunch of administrative, regulatory, and legal hurdles. And that's just backwards, and we need to fix it.
Shall I go next? I'll go back to the silver bullet, and I'll start off with a couple of thought processes for me. One is, Firstly, what do we get from the state? As individuals, wherever we are globally, what does the state offer us, and is it affordable? So I think the governments of the day, no matter what country you're in, find it very difficult to look and make any changes to the state system. It's not going to be attractive politically. Certainly within the UK or other areas where you're elected every 4 or 5 years, making changes to something that costs makes you unpopular. But that's the first thing. So what's the state system? What's the income replacement rate given by the state? When is it payable? How does it increase? And what does that give in terms of retirement? Secondly, and Jenny, I'd like to praise you on the wording that you used earlier, which was automatic. And I love that word, automatic.
I stole it from Pension Protection Act.
You don't tell anyone you steal, certainly.
Borrowed is better.
Yeah. So utilising the word automatic, and I'll do the same and utilise it now. The C word, as David refers to, compulsion or defaulting or otherwise, what do we learn globally when we're talking about retirement saving? There's roughly an amount of contribution that's required to be made by individuals to afford their own private standard of living in retirement. This is on top of that state system. So what's the right contribution, total contribution level? You could say somewhere between 10% of remuneration to around 15% of remuneration. Depends on what country you live in, depends what income replacement we need to have. But as a silver bullet, we know what we need to save. Now, how do we do that? Do we do it automatically, that we're told by legislators? Do we do it automatically that employers tell us that? Do we do it like a one-size-fits-all method of this is what you should save, it's up to you when you do it and how you do it and what you want to target? The next phase beyond that is if we go to automatically taking income, as Jenny said earlier, what are the right products, what are the right solutions to do a couple of things. One, which, Jeff, I can't wait for your book, by the way. I'll plug it for you next year as much as I can. What does income look like? What level of protection do you need? There's a behavioural and a financial mechanic that goes on. Can I afford to retire? What's my life going to look like? If I just stop working, what do I do? Who do I talk to on a daily basis? Do I have to talk to my wife more? That would be a good thing for me, but other people might be going, yeah, good point. Need more hobbies.
Get a dog.
And then the second is behaviourally and financially, do I actually have enough money to retire? And will it give me the security that I need to stay in that standard of living that I'm either used to or I can adapt to during my retirement? So I think automatic income solutions, which are products which others around the room have and offer, are really clear methods to consider.
Yeah, Mike, thank you, and Jeff. Senator Harkin, I met with the great Patrick Moynihan many a time and Charlie Rangel, and they stressed to me when I was working on privatisation and Social Security, they said, David, you don't seem to understand that Social Security is critical in this country and that's all that people have. And that really resonated with me. The second part they both said to me is Americans are trying to replicate what their parents had in the 60s, 50s and 60s of healthcare and also certainty. They want the age of certainty back in a period of age of uncertainty. I think that's difficult, but I wouldn't be too dispelled by this great country. Artemis II took place last week. John F. Kennedy talked about at Rice University, we go to the moon today, not because it's easy, but it's hard. And I think if you try at least to solve the problem, that's quite critical. All around the world, regulators are trying to work together. But they're working together through vehicles like the OECD or the International Organization of Pension Supervisors. And that's the question I'd say to your congressmen and your senators. Please, please ask the Department of Labor to re-engage with the rest of the world more fully and to seek ideas and resonate with them. I've been told in some uncertain, Eric, we shared this, that we in the United States can work this problem out. I think it's good to talk about other people and other solutions. Three points I'd share with you just quickly. Advice and access to advice is critical. This fair country doesn't have a liberty of access to advice. There is vast tracts of the United States, Australia, where I grew up, and in the UK, that people will never get access to advice because they're simply too poor. And do you provide or do you intercede with AI, Mike, or alternatives? Second part is that investments can move up and down. We hear all about that, but it's a challenge, and it's a challenge that people don't really understand. And the last point that Larry Zimpelman once used to talk about to me was financial friendship. People really want to hug, and they really want to cuddle, as we say in Australia, cuddle, because they want to be reassured of what they're doing is right in retirement. And that's not easy. And if you can provide the vehicle for cuddling, just go, well, no. But anyway, the organizations out there, I think, are critical, because I read a book once in this fair country about the reason why Americans don't bowl anymore. You don't. You do a lot of Netflix and a lot of streaming, but you used to bowl. And society is needing support. And if we can go back out and learn to bowl on retirement income, that might be quite useful.
I appreciate how David sort of hits at the central political problem that we see, across the spectrum that we have with pension regulators around the world, whether it's a mandatory system, whether it's all voluntary system. The spectrum is from compulsion through coercion to full independence. And I think we would caution there's no silver bullet, because there's no single one answer that can be applied across given economies, and that's because pension policy reflects the social fabric and the political culture of whatever market it's been constructed in. And so solving for the US means solving for our market. And we know some of the central tensions in financial services for our industry between the US, in particular our friends in Brussels, is regulators who want to compel you to make investment decisions to favor certain asset classes over others. Now for us, when we say, well, we have a fiduciary responsibility to deliver an outcome of X% for a client, if you put us 80% in X type of assets, we can't do that. Or we don't have confidence that we can do that over the lifetime of the investment. So striking this balance between seeking appropriate products for lifetime income, while also allowing investment professionals to make decisions that their experience teaches them will deliver those outcomes. I think that's sort of where the secret sauce of the conversation has to happen if we're going to get to those type of turning those solution ideas into viable products in the marketplace.
It seems like there's multiple issues around the C word here and other words related to it, all the way up to automation. There's compulsive savings and compulsive income, and do we have a sense from trial and error and experience which is more effective or which one we're better at so far, given, Mike, some of the shifts in the UK and how you've done things, and Australia has been on one end of that as well. So the compulsion in income versus compulsion in saving.
I'd answer the question from a political perspective. I work closely with a guy called the Honourable John Dawkins, who's Treasurer of Australia. And he said, David, we've compelled Australians to save for their retirement. That's good. More importantly, we've lifted coverage levels from 40% of the workforce to 91% of the workforce. That's good. But David, I need to be voted back in every 3 years, and to tell an Australian how to spend their retirement savings is political death. It's a difficult dilemma. I think the issue, it's not so much the compulsion, is the nudging behaviours to try to get the right outcome. The regulator in Australia is saying to the trustee of the fiduciary, make products that are sustainable and suitable for retirees. The industry comes back and says, well, tell us what you want. We'll make it, but just give us guidance. I think the real challenge, though, is that people want a good standard of living in retirement, and they worry incessantly that not only are they going to be incapacitated in retirement, but already they're seeing it with their parents. And that's a consideration. It's not only retirement, but it's the long-term care and the health considerations that this country has to embrace as well. It's a holistic package, which I think was...
If I could build on this, I think we see in multiple markets, whether it's Asia or Europe or Latin America, a combination of governments using incentives to nudge people to get into the savings habit, whether it's the Nest program in UK or KiwiSaver in New Zealand. These are very effective at the government sort of literally giving a financial incentive. They'll help you get started in a savings habit. And then when we combine that with technological developments to put pension right here, where everybody lives all over the world. Over the last 10 years, the Indian government banked over 400 million Indians by making banking products available on their phones. In Kenya, they've tied the national pension system to the national telecom carrier to make it mobile, where people live. These seem like very microeconomic solutions, but at the aggregate level, they're very helpful. So I think we certainly take stock in that, and at Principal, we have now products in digital wallets from China to Malaysia to Thailand that at the retail level are helping people find those solutions at the tip of their fingers. Sort of, you're putting a complex financial instrument in someone's hands in a way that's comprehensible. So I'm pretty positive about being able to create lifetime solutions that way.
I just want to add a behavioral angle to this, which is if you talk to most people, they're pretty happy with their Social Security benefit. But if you ask them to annuitize their defined contribution plan, they're really opposed to it. And what's the difference here? The difference is in Social Security, which is compulsory, like we've sort of endowed them with this annuity, whereas in the defined contribution space, we've sort of endowed them with this lump sum of wealth, and people are very reluctant to give up what they have for something else that they don't completely understand. So it's one of the ways that we can try to work with these behavioral biases instead of trying to fight against them is to think about the fact that, like in many 401k plans, there's the employee contribution and then there's the employer match. Well, just to think out loud for a moment, not a full-blown policy proposal, what if we made the employer match in the form of guaranteed lifetime income rather than in the form of wealth accumulation? So what the worker's putting in, they still have their control over, and we're not telling them what to do with that. But what their employer is matching, we create a fiduciarily, legally safe, maybe even compulsory environment where their piece of it is going in to provide future lifetime income. They don't give them account balances. They tell them what their future income is going to be. I think that would completely change the status quo and the way people have framed it, and then they would view it much more naturally. And I think those are some of the things we need to be thinking about. And maybe there is a full-blown proposal there, but not yet.
Shall I add? In terms of the UK, what are we really good at? We're really good at the royal family and the media. We're great at soccer. And thanks for hosting the World Cup later on during the year as well. I'm looking forward to that. We're also really good at afternoon tea. Those are my top three. I didn't mention anything there in terms of retirement. We are actually pretty good at technology. So we're introducing targeted support, a way of automatically helping individuals make the right choices at the point of retirement. This is going into a system which I think is shared globally. We have fragmented savings as individuals. How do we remove that fragmentation and help those savings come together to enable choices at the point of retirement with right products and solutions? That's the area that we're starting to forge ahead with within the UK. I think Australia are doing similar with regard to work you've done, David, on retirement income covenant. That's the area that we're really good at in the UK. The second area is probably how do we invest? And there's political learnings of how we invest, but that's probably for another question of are we making best use of capital to give better outcomes? And I'm sure Jenny will have a position on that as well.
Well, that's a great place to go next, I think, is this conversation about the intersection between investing and retiring, and not just on an individual scale as to how you allocate your 401k, but also how a large pension system allocates their capital. Is there a disconnect between how we see investments and how we use retirement dollars.
There absolutely has grown to be one, right? As we've gotten so, I hate to say the word conservative, but so careful about what we let somebody invest their 401k in, that it's turning out that the actual investing universe for people in their 401k, which is their intent to grow and intent to supplement their retirement income, is too benign to actually produce the outcomes that we used to see in the defined benefit world. The defined benefit world, we had a sophisticated investment trustee who was able to invest across the investing universe, including privates, things that weren't generally available to the mass public, and drive outcomes by their ability to invest and by sophisticated investment professionals. And I think Eric's touched on it some. One of the important things that we need to bring back to the defined contribution space is permissibility for investment professionals to design solutions that access more of the private markets.
I would agree with that. And what I would say is, though, an important distinction, and I believe this is what you're also saying, Jennifer, is that I'm perfectly comfortable and think it's a good idea to open up the full universe of investment options if it's done through professional management as an intermediary. I don't think it's a great idea to just like allow people to use their 401k brokerage account to invest in Bitcoin or to go pick their own private credit lender to invest in and things like that, because we know that financial literacy in the US and really around the world is quite low. Half the population can't describe the difference between a stock and a bond. So it's probably not a good idea for them to be making individual investment choices in a wide range of alternatives. But I love the idea of like, a target date fund, which by the way has a lifetime income sleeve in it in my ideal world, being able to invest in the whole suite of both public and private assets, because the private side of the market is a huge part of the economy, and that's where a lot of the growth is coming from. And so I don't know if you agree or disagree with that distinction, but I think that's an important caveat.
I think just quickly, financial literacy, ladies and gentlemen, is critical. Whether we can ignore that huge elephant gone past that mammoth in the room. In Australia, we have a beer called X, and X, 4X. Very popular in Queensland. Didn't think too hard on the branding. But the argument is Australia's financial literacy average age is 12. 12 years old, but suddenly they're exposed to compulsory retirement and compulsory pensions and saving. But wait for it, in Australia, we give people choice of fund, choice of investment. You can move your money anywhere because you've got choice of fund. Do you want to exercise choice? Pretty radical, average reading age, 12. And finally, to do the other equation here is in Australia, we have means-tested social security. Not everybody gets it. It's means-tested income and assets test. Now you say it will never happen here. Never is a long time, but it exists in Australia.
If I speak on pension fund capital, so what we save is a huge pot. Whatever country you're in, there's trillions to be invested. Where can that money be invested is the question, whether it's some of the private market solutions that Jenny spoke about before. How is that money invested for the greater good of the people that it's going to give income to? So the debates that we often get within the UK is, should pension fund capital, our funds as all of us combined, our monies, where should it be invested for our lifetimes and our better futures? Should it be in areas that we should or shouldn't talk about? Climate change, sustainable investments. Should it be really topical right now? Energy infrastructure, making our countries independent for energy, whether that's renewable energies, whether it's mining or otherwise. I know you're saying steady.
I think you're going to say sustainability and ESG then. But,
So that's the first question. Where else should money be spent? Fortunately or unfortunately, we're spending a lot of money on defence and increasing defence spending. How much of our pension fund capital should go to that defence spending? And that defence spending could be cybersecurity. It could be right through to munitions and different weapons. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but that's a debate. Third and fourth angles, really what David mentioned before around housing. Globally, we have issues for people in their 20s and 30s. They can't afford to buy a home. They can't afford to live. They're going to rent. Do they want to rent for the rest of their lives? Should pension fund capital be investing in social housing infrastructure to make sure that housing is available for purchase and for the longer term? So there's questions of, in the accumulation phase, are we doing enough to be able to give better outcomes and a better standard of living when people are in income and in receipt of that income? And then secondly, I think one of the areas, Jenny, hope you don't mind, that you picked upon was, how do we invest in defined benefit schemes and final salary schemes? I think that's great where you have open schemes and the ability to invest. Where they're closed, and we see this within the UK, you have risk transfer, where it's moved away from single occupational employers that offer the scheme to consolidate to much insured-backed schemes. That gives the ability to use that capital not only to secure that income that people expect to be guaranteed in that lifetime, but then secondly, insurance companies can utilise the way they see fit to deliver long-terms and longevity returns that just isn't the individual within a scheme plan or otherwise. So I'll say the opportunity around pension fund capital, both in saving and in income space, can help deliver better outcomes that are more than just single individuals.
Does that apply to governments and Social Security and other schemes? I know David was talking about privatizing Social Security earlier.
I will leave the political kryptonite of Social Security reform to the next panel. Jenny and Jeff touched on the life cycle investment issue, which is really sort of top of the envelope being pushed in terms of where, like the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development's pension team just this year began a 2-year study on life cycle investment, and the degree to which they're reaching out to the asset management and pension industry globally is really welcome, because it allows us to introduce concepts of what assets could be considered to be possible in life cycle investment, where the risk gets tailed down towards the end of a savings career to be turned more profitably into long-term income. That study will be published in the OECD Pension Outlook in 2028, right? Because they just launched the 2-year investigation cycle. But if that's where 35 of the world's most advanced economies are already leaning, I think that's a positive development, and it's one for the industry to embrace and get involved with, because if it indicates that regulators are open to that discussion, then that's where we need to go.
The question you asked is a really important one, because one of the debates, and I won't state a personal viewpoint on this, is when you think about, like if you go back to the Social Security reform debate that we had 20 years ago, there was one side that was basically saying, we want individuals to be able to allocate those resources within the accounts on their own. And the other side saying that is such an inefficient and high-cost way to do it, we ought to have the government have a central investment pool. And then the argument was always around, how do you prevent the kind of government political interference in the investment decisions that this administration wants to invest in sustainability and the next one does not. This administration wants to invest in the defense industry and the next one does not. And how do you provide a structure that insulates that? Or maybe some people have the view that they don't want to insulate it, that's the whole point. They want to be able to use those funds to direct towards certain uses. And ultimately, that is a big part, 20-something years ago, of how people somehow fell down on that issue of whether it should be centralized investment or personal investment, was their view on the desirability or the undesirability of political interference in those investment decisions.
Yeah, well put. The idea of using our money to drive certain outcomes or to relay our value system or overlay that onto the world that we see. There's always this tension between should we be doing that or should we be going for right. good returns?
And just think about what the Biden administration would have favored versus what the Trump administration would have favored. They're very different things. And it's probably not a great thing for the investment portfolio of individuals or for how capital is being allocated for very large sums of trillions of dollars of money to be whipsawing back and forth based on who happens to be in office at a given time. So the economist in me thinks it's not a great idea. But there, look, the federal thrift savings plan is a very large, sort of centrally managed thing that keeps fees low, but they have a governance mechanism in place that largely prevents that kind of interference. And I think those are the kind of conversations we need to have, and they're going to come up again when we start seriously debating Social Security.
I think there's a dichotomy, everyone, between what is happening in Europe and what's happening in the United States, which we need to be aware of, is in Sweden and Norway, where I was a couple of months ago. They're arguing that ESG and sustainability and decarbonising their economies is going to be an important point for their pensions and their Social Security going forward to give security. It's very different than what I shared with Eric, what we've encountered at the DOL, and where those phrases are just not acknowledged. I think that's really important, and I think it's the intergenerational fairness that's going to be in play here. Can pay-as-you-go models be sustained in Europe is the real challenge that's happening at the moment. And it's happening, and it's being asked that sort of question. I think we are, ladies and gentlemen, in an age of uncertainty, and that's only going to exacerbate. And Mike, you and I have talked about this, is where increasingly governments are mandating or telling pension funds where to invest money so they can stimulate economic growth in economies. That's really dangerous. That's really dangerous because pet political projects start to foster.
I mean, just here in the United States, Dave, like we've got this whole red state, blue state thing going on, and a number of big financial services companies were getting letters from state attorney generals from some states saying, we want to see you invest in ESG, and other states saying, if you invest in ESG, we're not going to allow you to manage our state pension funds. And so this politicization of the whole investment portfolio is a very dangerous direction to go.
And the global track record isn't great. It's Argentina in 2003, it's Hungary now, it's Peru over the last 3 years. And so those are three systems that have largely gone bankrupt, nationalized and bankrupt. So, caution to what you wish for, and all of that will be freighted into any discussion of Social Security reform.
And it's the litigation risk, Jeff. We talked about this. You're going to have members in Oregon and say, how dare you? I'm in funds that are investing in nuclear power and weapons structures. That's wrong, sue. And then in Virginia, the great state of Virginia, you're not allowing me to go and invest in tobacco or whatever to maximize rates of return. I think there's a natural tension here, and how you square that circle. The politicization of pensions gets very dangerous. Remember, all that a pension is a promise to pay. What I'm worried about in the future is, will that promise be adhered to in the future?
And it seems the other big tension is between flexibility and certainty. This idea of being able to rely on or have some guarantee and to have options to do what you want to do. Is the answer to that trade-off, is that different based on where you live? Should that be a personal choice? Is that a government choice? Or is there a right balance for everybody?
So I'd say anecdotally it's both of those. We've asked a survey for the UK population for the last 5 years. That same question, do you want freedom or do you want lack of freedom and protection? 90% they want both.
I would like my cake and we'll eat it too, thank you.
Yeah.
Exactly, with cream and ice cream.
I mean, the good news is in the annuity ecosystem, we can provide a level of that. There's pure play annuitization, which is definitely a maximizing from an economic perspective. It will maximize dollar of guaranteed income per dollar of premium. And then there's withdrawal benefits that say, okay, you can withdraw from your assets, and if you run out of money, then the insurance company will make the payment to you for the rest of your life. And what we know, I know the chart on my head, but I can't think of the right number, is that in the retail space, where there's $2.5 trillion of annuities, so we see how people engage with annuities, but for those annuities that are used for lifetime income, and do not quote me on this, but it's something like 90% of annuities that are used for lifetime income are done through those withdrawal benefits not the annuitization benefit. Jeff talked about the annuitization puzzle and why don't people actually do it, and it's because they want both. And the great news is, as an insurance industry, we've designed products that give both. They give lifetime income while maintaining access to your money. And you know, as an actuary and as a purist, I would love to see us get to a place where behavioral finance and people's just general understanding of annuities is such that we can go all the way to true pure play annuities and true risk pooling. We are not there yet, and I just don't think we get there in our lifetimes.
Completely agree. Sorry, Jeff. I think what we really need is exactly what you say, a level of protection, which is an annuity in a form, and then a flexibility for people's lifetime, which is around healthy lifetime as well. There's differences within UK, and it's probably the same within the US. There's areas where people don't have healthy lifestyles for much of their retirement, so maybe only a couple of years, where others have it for 20 to 30 years. You need to have flexibility to live the life that you have individually. So I think a level of protection with a level of flexibility to enable you to do things that you want, whether it's Larry, go to Hawaii a couple of times a year, or whether it's you're going to consider how you're going to live in care in your later health stages of lifestyle as well. Sorry, Jeff.
No. I was just, that's exactly the point I wanted to make, which is like, we think about it as security at one end and flexibility at the other end, but I think what we need to do is like flip it and say we need a baseline of security, and then we have the flexibility above that. And where that line is drawn is going to be different for different people. Right? So the framework that I usually use, and I talk about in some of my writing, is like everybody has their own definition of what an essential expenditure is for them. For some people, that might be taking a trip to Hawaii. For most people, it's like putting a roof over their head and food on their table and so forth. And that piece, there's really no substitute in terms of the way you maximize the security of that is through as pure of an annuity as you can get. And then above that, like, it frees you up. I mean, talk about ultimate freedom. If your basics, if your essentials are taken care of, then you've got so much flexibility with what you do with the rest that's where the real freedom comes from. And you can either do that through a very pure form annuity at the bottom and then flexibility at the top, or you can combine it through these different products that have some of both, and then you need a little more of it since you're trying to do two things with the same pot. But I think that's really the right way we need to have the conversation. Sorry, Dave.
Just quickly, what we're encountering is a baby boomer generation who's fierce in terms of how they're going to live retirement. They're going to enjoy it. They're going to be the go-go generation, then the slow-go generation, and then they're going to be the no-go generation. They're going to just take it largely easier. But the study that I'd point you to is a little bit opposite to my fellow speakers, is those people who don't spend their money. Those people who conserve it so desperately. And the University of Queensland, along with QUT, studied a graveyard, a cemetery in Brisbane, and looked at all the returns, tax returns of these people. A pretty morbid study.
Yeah, where they're spending their money at the time.
And what they found was the amount of money they retired on and when they passed away was largely the same. They didn't spend the money to enjoy. They were worried about intergenerational transfers to the next generation. The question is, ladies and gentlemen, I'll leave you with is that going to happen in the future?
I think the reason this finding has been found in other places. I think the reason people aren't spending their money is out of fear.
Yeah.
And out of the fact that we have framed it as your definition of success is not to let your account balance go.
Right.
So this gets back to the whole issue of like, if you have annuitized income and you eliminate the fear, but in order to get them to do that, we've got to get away from this idea that your number is the magic thing. If you want to have a number that's the magic thing, it should be what your monthly income is, not what your account statement says at a point in time.
Better to burn up than fade away. So there you go.
So we're about out of time. We do have some questions from the audience. I'll try to squeeze at least one of them in here. And this one I think should be a fun answer. Are annuities universally good for everyone?
It's a hard question to answer because we know that there are some people, like, look, if I have a terminal diagnosis of pancreatic cancer and I know I've got months to live, then of course not. But that's an exception. I think the vast majority of people would benefit from having an annuity, even though, and this is, I don't want to get too much into the math here, but even people who think they're going to have a lower than average life expectancy, there's still an advantage to having an annuity. It might not look like as good a deal using an investment frame, but if you think about it as insurance, if you know that you have a higher mortality risk, then the cost to you of having to save money for the possibility that you might live to be 95 years old is really inefficient. And an annuity for you actually takes that issue off the table and allows you to then focus on how you want to use the rest of that money in the near term. So I wouldn't say it's good for everybody, but it's good for far more people than make use of it today.
And when we say annuity, we're thinking a broad term here, not just the retail annuities that someone would sell, but annuities in the DB universal sense of some form of lifetime guaranteed income.
Yeah, that's really the key.
And I would say for that same family, if your life expectancy is very short, you're also planning for those you leave behind.
Correct.
And you've got to think about that income as not ending the day you end, but carrying on for your family as well. Is there other perspectives on annuities as a universal solution?
So I think it's great for the reasons Jeff said. It's also bad if people don't want to have that protection or want to game the system. Don't know whether anyone's been to Vegas recently, but if you want to gamble against it, you can. You don't need to have that level of protection. You might back yourself to have income. The other biggest factor within Australia, which I'll take David's line for him, is there's no inheritance in Australia, so you need a level of protection. But actually, I might just want to keep the rest of my money to pass to family or gamble.
So the estate tax is a factor in
It's
that.
a big factor geographically. So within the US and the UK, massive issue. Within Australia, not having an estate tax means that I maybe don't want to.
We don't have a death tax in Australia.
Is that one of those compulsion things or those nudges that governments can do?
We just out. So we, I think the annuities, like maybe there's a need for impaired life annuities more and more. Yeah. That some people, in Glasgow, Northeast, just won't live too long. They've got immune responses that will see them die early. Maybe they should get paid a lot better. But can we just change the name of annuities? Can we just, I know there's actuaries.
Automatic income.
Yeah, and I tried to pass an actuarial exam once, gave that away. But it was annuities. It's a dumb name.
Yes.
And we've heard a lot of other words that could be hypothetically interchangeable. There's secure income or reliable income or comfort, cuddle time, right? Like there are other ways to frame that conversation. But sometimes when it gets to, is that word still a barrier, do you find in your business?
I think
was asking Jenny that,
I think it's a challenge. I think what the South Africans have done is they're calling it flexible income, and they get rid of the annuity word, flexible income.
So I think, no, not everybody needs to have an annuity in their portfolio, but I think everybody needs to have access to and education about. And in doing that, listen, I have been in more compliance meetings where I've tried to say the word guaranteed income or secure income or anything other than annuity, and I beat my head against the wall because ultimately these things are filed with the states as annuities, and annuities in and of themselves are not bad. There was a period of time when they maybe had some bad sales practices, not great, but I think the really, really important thing is that financial literacy, period, the end, and financial literacy about the value of lifetime income so that people don't look at annuities and say, bad word. They look at annuities and say lifetime income.
Any solution in the US, if it provides lifetime income, but it includes lifetime health care, yeah, sure, that's possible. Is it wish casting? Yes, but that's kind of where the politics would have to go, I think, to make it a potential real, durable product in the market.
So we have regulatory barriers, we have behavioral barriers, we have language barriers when it comes to some of these options or ideas. Ultimately, it's about, I like the idea of switching the conversation so that it's a base of income, it's a base of certainty with some flexibility on top. That's more than all the time we have. We could talk all day. I appreciate the panel and all of your attention. Thank you so much. And we'll hand it back to Raina.
Thank you, everybody.